Hello, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. Come on in. It's so nice to see everybody. Can't wait to get started today. Come on in. We had 125 people register for today's event, so super excited to see so much interest in learning about the latest ethical storytelling report. Um, really would love for, before I get started, my favorite thing is to see the impact that we have in the room. So I would love it if everyone would drop, not even just where they're located, but what your mission is. So let us know what your mission is in the chat. My name's Carly Euler. I'm the marketing director here at MemoryFox. I think probably most of you know me, but if you don't, I've been here for a few years. I am the creator of the Ethical Storytelling Report, the 2023, and now our 2024 one. Looks like we still have oh, great. We've got one answer here. Breast cancer education. Love that. Wonderful. Thanks for coming, Ryan. Jansen from Stone Soup Cafe is a pay what you can eat restaurant. Oh my gosh, thank you. I know they're Stone Soup Cafe, you're one of our newest customers. Nice to see you. Megan Taylor, we provide resources that insurance won't cover for veterans, first responders. Oh yes, at Chive Charities. Love that. We'll be talking a little bit about Chive Charities today. Wonderful. Kathleen, legal aid for low-income people in 8 counties. Amazing. So this is so great. Like, think of already the big differing impact that we're having in the room today. It's so exciting to see all these answers come in. Brody, York, Pennsylvania, adult literacy, ESL, and high school equivalency for adults. That's wonderful. Thanks for coming today, Brody. Well, I mentioned in my email that I love to start promptly, so I think I will hop right in. As you all know, if you registered, this is being recorded, and I will, send it out to everybody afterwards. That includes everybody that registered for the event. So if anybody asks that later in the chat, let them know. That's the truth. Okay, so I'll start by saying this presentation is very dense. So I would love it if you want to take screenshots, if you want to write more questions in the chat, write your feedback in the chat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get through as much of the presentation in about 45 minutes, and then I will open it up to questions. So definitely write those questions in the chat, and I will look forward to answering them at the end. But great. So in that case, I think it's a really wonderful time to get started. So here we go. All right. So, like I said, I am Carly Euler. I'm the marketing director here at MemoryFox. Like I already mentioned, I did organize and create the 2023 and 2024 ethical storytelling reports. Before that, I worked for nonprofits in-house for about 9 years. I did that, I specialized in communications, peer-to-peer campaigns, sponsorships, and special events. Some of the really awesome places that I have worked or volunteered include the Breast Cancer Coalition, CODA Support Foundation, the Wiley Network, Kenya Lacrosse Association, and the BOMA Project. So if anybody knows any of those organizations, give me a little thumbs up in the chat, or, if anybody has missions similar to those, again, thumbs up in the chat. Love to see it. All right, so hopping right in, you might be wondering, why does a tech platform like MemoryFox, why are we even thinking about ethical storytelling? So I'd love to give you a quick background. So in 2023, as part of our education initiative, we put together a panel with 4 of the leading experts that are working on ethical storytelling. And we did that because we kept getting questions from our own MemoryFox storytellers about kind of the best ways to collect and share stories ethically. So we thought, okay, let's put together a panel. We'll bring 4 panelists. It'll be 60 minutes. We'll kind of get all the big questions answered, and then, we'll know everything about ethical storytelling, right? But of course, what we didn't see coming was that over 400 people were going to register for that event. And that meant that 150 multifaceted, really kind of tough questions came in. And if you've ever attended a panel, I'm sure you know that in any given 60 minutes, you pretty much only get to about 10 or 12 questions. So we certainly were never going to get to 150. So really what we determined very early on is that we needed to find a way to continue the conversation. So we decided to take matters into our own hands and create the first ethical storytelling report. So we had a 2023 version, and now this is our updated 2024 version. Specifically in this 2024 version, this includes insights from 30 storytelling experts, thought leaders, boots on the ground nonprofit professionals, and we talk about a lot of the topics that are involved with ethical storytelling, but kind of a lot of focus on ethical story collection, trauma-informed interviews, stereotype stories, consent, and privacy. So if you have not downloaded your copy of the report, go ahead and do that now. You can always, refer back to it later. There's probably going to be a lot of things I touch on that you're going to want to read more in depth. And before I get to all of the great insights, I want to first share where they came from. So we have a lot of thought leaders and consultants that are quoted in the report. Some ones that really stand out would be Maria Bryan. She does a certification on trauma-informed storytelling. If you haven't looked into her, she does a wonderful job with that. Our friend Diana Farias Heinrich, she has a very specific niche where she talks about informed consent and how nonprofits can better collect informed consent from storytellers, and so on and so forth. This list is really full of a lot of heavy hitters. But we also did include perspectives from nonprofit professionals that are currently doing a great job of ethical storytelling, as well as our own MemoryFox staff, because these are topics that we think about every day. And then the really cool thing about the 2024 report is that we were able to collect 5 ethical storytelling case studies. So these were submitted by nonprofits that really have already made some ethical storytelling changes. They told us about the problem that they solved, how they solved it, as well as kind of the outcomes, both long-term and short-term, that they have experienced since they've made those changes. So there are 5 ethical storytelling case studies in the report. Today, I'm going to do a deep dive on our friends on I Would Rather Be Reading's case study, but overall would love for you to check out Artist Here, the Seattle Clemency Project, Chive Charities, and Cameras for Girls. Okay, so like I said, this is an 81-page report that I am breaking down to try to get as much content into about 45 minutes for you, so then we'll have time for questions. Today's journey, I want to talk about the state of the sector, so some of the biggest survey results that we found. Then I want to talk about ethical story collection, ethical story sharing, consent, that ethical storytelling case study I mentioned, anonymous storytelling, because I know a lot of us here have missions that are so sensitive that perhaps we can't actually share the identities of the people who are telling stories, and then some of our big key takeaways. All right, so let's hop right in, getting started thinking about the state of the sector. Okay, so just as an FYI, on the following charts, you're going to see orange lines. Those are going to indicate the 2023 results, and the purple lines are going to indicate the 2024 results. So the first question I asked respondents was, how can you rate how important ethical storytelling is to you as an individual? And I'm proud to report that every single person that surveyed rated ethical, that participated in the survey, rated ethical storytelling as a 3, which is a little important or greater. So you can see that the vast majority, well over 80% of people over 2 years, actually view ethical storytelling as extremely important. And much smaller, about 13% said they believe it's very important. So that's really the trend that we were expecting to see. But next, we sought to understand how one's individual values may differ from what they perceive the value of their actual organization to be. So we asked respondents to rate how important they believe ethical storytelling is to their organization specifically. So notably, you can see that these charts do trend in the same direction. However, the answers here about your organization do skew a little lower. Only 72% reported that they believe their organization finds ethical storytelling to be extremely important, while 20% said that they believe it to be very important. So, unlike the chart on the left, some respondents did actually say they felt that ethical storytelling was not at all important to their organization. So that was something we weren't really expecting to see, and of course, that's not something that we hope to see in the future. One thing we know here at MemoryFox is that the most important part of story collection is consent. And the cool thing is nonprofits believe that too. Actually, 81% said that they find it to be extremely important, and 14% said it was very important. But just like we talked about on the last slide, just because you believe that consent is extremely important, it does not always mean you are collecting consent regularly. So we asked respondents how they felt about their organization's current system for collecting consent and if they felt like it was solid. And we actually found that many people feel their organization does not currently have a great system in place. So even though we saw that 80% of respondents said that they found consent to be extremely important, just a mere 24% feel like they really have a great system in place to do so. On the right here, you can see that respondents were most likely to agree at about 30%. But unfortunately, we do see that 6% do strongly disagree. So again, not something that we were hoping to see. For me though, I think the most interesting thing probably about these charts is that the data really remained consistent over the past 2 years. I actually would have expected to see some improvements over the past year. I mean, we're talking to nonprofits constantly about consent. All of our storytellers are encouraged to collect consent up front. But, as an overall sector, we're finding that really not that much improvement has been made over the past year. But of course, that's something we will continue to spread the word about and hopefully get improved. And hopefully we'll be improving in the 2025 results. All right, so this report also has a few brand new questions. These are open-ended ones. And I'd love to hear in the chat what your answers are as well, because what I did was I asked the survey respondents as an option, this was not required. I wanted them to write, what steps does your organization currently take to ensure stories are collected and shared ethically? I actually read through all of the answers myself and I pulled out keywords. I didn't use AI for this. I actually read through them to try to get at the essence of what the nonprofit what the person was trying to share with me. So when I put all of their answers into this nice word cloud here, you can see that the biggest ones indicate things that organizations are most likely to do currently. So we found that 58 people responded that they currently collect consent, so that's wonderful. Right behind them was kind of that top one, which is removing identifying information. 20 people responded that they're currently doing that. I think it sounds like maybe Kendall is doing that too when you are anonymizing your quotes. So that would be kind of removing the identifying information. Love that. We also saw that some other things that ranked kind of high here were to obtain final story approval, so asking for final approval before something goes live, as well as explaining the full storytelling process up front. So really great stuff that we saw. And now, as you probably imagined, on the flip side of things, I would love if you would now write in the chat, what are some of your biggest challenges currently to adhering to ethical storytelling practices? Because obviously we all have things we can improve on, but I'd love to hear what you think right now seems to be a big challenge for you. And while you're writing your answers in the chat, I'll share with you the results. And these were much more across the board than just the things that people were currently doing. So kind of the top 3 most reported themes were a lack of education, which means that they feel like they just don't have a great understanding of ethical storytelling and therefore they're not able to implement it very well. Second would be a lack of training. So that is referring to maybe we understand ethical storytelling, but we're not sure where to start. And then also no formal process. So maybe we understand ethical storytelling, but we don't really have anything in place to actually make sure that we're doing it or that we're following up or that we're actually making things, widespread as an organization. All right, looks like Megan dropped in the chat. If they don't want to share any part of their story, we do allow that. And it has no impact on their grant selection. Love that. Also, not being comfortable on camera or familiarity with technology. Yes, that can be a huge barrier, right? Having people feel comfortable getting in front of a camera or feel comfortable even talking about themselves. Some people are just uncomfortable even sharing their own stories just in everyday life, much less something that might be publicly shown, right? Well, great. As you keep thinking about your current things that you're doing and your current challenges, I'm going to go ahead and move on to some strategies, okay? So whatever you think your current challenges are, I hope today you at least learn one thing that you can start implementing tomorrow. So let's talk about ethical story collection first. And before I share my 5 keys to ethical story collection, first I want to show kind of an example of a story that is collected ethically and what that might look like, because it might surprise you that it might be a little easier than you think. So here is a clip from our friends at I Would Rather Be Reading. So this was one clip that they actually put into a much grander fundraising video, which I will share a snippet at the end. But this is just one of the clips. So here you go.
Hi, my name is Kennedy, and I am the 2nd grade, and I go to Gudamuf Elementary. And I like after school program because we do a lot of fun things, and we get to do centers, and we also get to do our homework, and we get to go outside.
Okay, so just a short clip, ethically collected story. Love to see the hearts coming in the chat because I always feel like this video, just a short clip puts a big smile on my face. It makes me interested in what are they doing in that program? It seems like that this child's having a wonderful time. I mean, anybody that's saying they enjoy doing their homework and is really quite a win, right? All right, so let's talk about why we would consider this an ethically collected story. So kind of in the framing of our 5 keys. So our first key is to give your community the microphone. So what we mean by that is that with today's technology, you don't need to speak for others. And when you give your community the opportunity to speak for themselves, you're actually going to empower them to tell the story exactly how they would like it to be shared, right? So a direct quote with their real words in the real way that they would talk about their story. So important. Number 2 is to encourage sharing where and when they are comfortable. So when you allow for space for your storyteller to actually submit their story or record their story where and when they are most comfortable, that's going to reduce the stress on your storyteller and it's going to build trust over time with your organization. So they might be more willing to share more details or they might be willing to come back to share again with you. Number 3 is to be upfront about how you intend to use the story. So your storyteller might be willing to share more or less information based on how you plan to use the story. So a good example to keep in mind here might be that if you are going to be sharing a story in a grant report and you let your storyteller know that up front, they might be more willing to share more content in that story and more details in that story because they understand certain people will be having access to their story. However, if you let them know up front that this will be something shared on social media with a potential reach of, worldwide or of nationwide, they might be wanting to remove some of those details when they're sharing their story. So it's really good to just for an ethical standpoint, to tell them upfront your intentions. Number 4 is to use strength-based messaging. Think about what questions you are asking your community. And will those questions elicit the response you're actually looking for? So if you're looking for strength-based answers where people are talking about all of the wonderful things that your nonprofit has done or the wonderful things that they have had experiences with since they've worked with your nonprofit, we really need to be asking questions using strength-based messaging in order to get those strength-based answers. And I'll talk more about strength-based prompts later on as well. And number 5 is to capture stories in real time and all year long. So you can tell in that video that was captured while she was participating in the program, in the middle of her having a good time on the playground. When you are able to capture stories in real time, you're going to really capture that passion in real time. And that's something that can be really hard to recreate if you're asking somebody months after something has occurred. To really kind of recall a feeling or elicit the same emotions can be very challenging for people. So it's really great to kind of avoid those gaps by capturing in real time and all year long. Okay, so you're probably wondering, all right, that all sounds good, but how do I even get started with collecting stories? Well, we recommend that you create an organization-wide policy, something that we call an ethical storytelling standards guide. And if you're looking, and you can start anywhere with your guide, you can do one of these things, you can do 2 of these things, but if you're thinking about maybe going full fully forward with getting an ethical storytelling standards guide, these are kind of the 8 things that I would start with, if it makes sense for your organization. So really quickly, I'll go through them. Number 1 is to list the deficit-based key phrases to avoid. So if you're going through a language change at your nonprofit where you're looking to start referring to your community in a new way, let's put it down on paper. And let's say these are the words we used to use and we no longer are planning to use in the future. Let's just be upfront and honest about it. These are things we're no longer going to use. But number 2 is super important, and that is to provide the strength-based alternatives so people don't feel like they are unsure what to say or how to speak about your nonprofit or about the community you serve. Instead, you want to say, hey, here are the terms we are going to use moving forward, so people do feel like they have the right language to use. Number 3 is taking it even one step further. These are full mission-focused terms and phrases. That's referring to full sentences people can, put in their back pocket to say, okay, this is the exact language that displays our new mission or the way that we're going to talk about our mission. Number 4 is thinking about your communication guidelines and how those might differ or be sorted by channel. So what I mean by that is it's important to make note of any communications that might happen to be different by channel. For example, many times people will ask me, well, what am I supposed to do if I'm writing a grant and the grant question is written with deficit-based language, but we don't personally use that language anymore? This would be maybe an exception to your rule. You might say, hey, I know I need to use if a grant has prompted me to use deficit-based framing in order to actually answer the question the way they would like it answered, this might be an exception to the rule, and it's nice to just put on paper, this is an exception we may or may not be willing to make. Number 5 is to link to other organizations who are doing this really well so you can reference them later. This really makes it much easier to make improvements by just looking to others for some advice, right? There's 5 case studies in the report. There's lots of other nonprofits that are doing some really great work out there. So having some other organizations with like-minded missions like yours that you admire is a great way to provide people with more resources. Number 6 is to include exercises that allowed your staff, your board, your volunteers to actually practice with your new language. So taking some time in your next board meeting, in your next staff meeting to really practice and have those conversations. Additionally, when you have new people coming on board, this should be part of your onboarding process. This is how you get people on board early with ethical storytelling. Number 7 is to make a commitment to reevaluate this document. So whatever makes sense for your organization, language is changing all the time, right? So maybe every year you want to just give it a glance and make sure everything is still feeling correct to you. Maybe it's every 2 years. Whatever you make your commitment to be, just make sure you stick to it. And finally, 8 would be to collect signatures. So when you do send this to your staff, your board, your volunteers, have them write their signature down. And that's really the key to gathering buy-in to ethical storytelling. Because when people place their signature on a document, what they're saying is, hey, I have read this and I'm going to do my best to follow these guidelines. So one example here of an organization that does a really fabulous job with kind of getting an organization-wide policy implemented is Horizons National. So they have over 40 satellite schools throughout the nation that they created this one strength-based messaging guide that they sent out to all of their teachers and mentors. So this is just a snippet of one of the images in their strength-based messaging guide, but I think it's a really great way to show, here's how we used to speak about our community. This is the stereotype-based communication that we, used to be comfortable using. Here is the need-based communication. This is something that we had transitioned to, but now today we want to focus on strength-based communication, and here's a solid example of that. So I just love this visual. I think it makes it really easy for people to understand the nuances and where we're going in the future. All right, moving right along, let's talk about ethical story sharing. So we know that a very important part of telling a really great story, sharing a really great story, is that there does elicit some sort of emotion, right? So we always know that a nonprofit story definitely is going to have some sort of emotional aspect, but here are kind of 4 things to keep in mind when you are writing an emotional story, especially through an ethical storytelling lens. Number 1 is to consider the golden rule. So we all remember the golden rule that we were taught in kindergarten, and that is to treat others the way you want to be treated. But this is a really good rule for storytelling as well. Before you share your story, think about if you would like to be the main character of this story, if you are okay with how the main character is being represented. Is this how you would want your story told? And if you feel like there's anything in there that's making you feel uneasy, it's a really good plan to go ahead and make some changes. Number 2 is to remember that positive emotions are also emotions. So the word emotion, sometimes when we're writing stories, can feel like it's synonymous with sadness or despair. But I want to remind you that there's a full spectrum of emotions that will inspire audiences to give. And so when I like to think about impactful storytelling, my favorite emotions to elicit would be hope and relief. When you're writing a story in a way that gives the donor hope for the future or relief because you've solved a problem, a long-term solution that's going to help solve a big problem, that's actually what's going to inspire people to come back and give again because they're going to feel that hope and everybody knows how great it feels to feel relieved when something's happening. And that's just a really great way to encourage recurring giving. Number 3 is that big trauma is not a necessity in all stories. So again, we tend to think that emotionally appealing stories have to have a big trauma involved in it or a very, very serious issue. But that's not true. With the rise of short form videos, with TikTok, with Instagram Reels, we're seeing that the shorter stories, little snippets, little showing into a little glimpse of life, those stories are actually performing really, really well without all of the over the top trauma and over the top serious issues being shown on the video, right? So we can actually tell stories on a much smaller scale as long as we're investing in kind of some creativity and really trusting that that is how people are wanting to consume stories right now. Number 4 is to remember that words matter even if you don't know the right ones. So what I mean by this is to be upfront and vulnerable with your actual storytellers. If you're not sure if you're using the right language, let's just be honest and tell them. Because whether it's because of their situation or their background or their race or their gender or their physical status, just approaching your storyteller with humility and honesty is always going to serve you. So remember, we're all learning here. Language is changing all the time, so we're going to be open to trying new things and learning new language. All right, one aspect of story sharing that I think sometimes we don't think about enough is actually from the reader's perspective. So Maria Bryan has done a particularly good job at getting this aspect more widely understood and kind of just widespread. We asked her, what is the best way to share stories while still being sensitive towards triggering others? And she said, content warnings allow us to share lived experiences while supporting the individual agency and the well-being of our audience. So really what she means by that is that our audience, they should have ownership on what they're wanting to consume. When you clearly label distressing material, you're actually giving the story consumer the ability to choose if they want to continue on, right? So a lot of times, especially on social media, we are just scrolling. We are taking in information on any given topic at any given second, and some things can be truly too jarring for us to take in at that moment. So let's talk about where that might come into play. Here's kind of our recommended content warnings, and I recognize that this might change based on your mission. So I really think that you and your staff and your board should really talk about what makes sense for you. But kind of as a general overview, we recommend content warnings for sexual assault, domestic abuse or child abuse, animal cruelty or animal death, self-harm or suicide, eating disorders, and violence. So really, if you're wondering if a story might need a content warning or should have a content warning, let me remind you of kind of the classic saying that people won't remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. And you really don't want your brand associated with something that will trigger people to want to quickly swipe away and not give and not be interested in learning more because it's something that they just don't feel like handling at the moment. All right, let's move on to consent. So there's a whole section of the report that is about consent. There's so many things that have to do with consent. Pretty much every answer in the report probably has some part of consent included in it, but what I tried to do here is kind of get all of that information down to maybe 4 keys. So I hope this does a reasonable job of starting consent. But let's think about, maybe very beginners, people who are just now starting to collect consent, as well as all the way down the spectrum of people who are just trying to do to collect consent better. So let's think about a number 1 key here would be to get written or electronic consent. So especially if you are not doing this yet, let's make sure that we're getting some sort of written consent or a click of a checkbox before somebody is giving you a story. We don't want to do verbal consent. We don't want to work on implied consent by any means. We want to make sure that people really know about our intentions for using that story and that they really do agree to it. So kind of the first key here is to make sure it's written, make sure it's electronic, something that they're clicking. Sometimes people ask me, well, what am I supposed to do if we have in-person programs, if we have big fundraising events? You see more and more often that when people are registering for events, that they're asked up front, hey, we're going to have a videographer there, we're going to have a photographer there, or do we have your consent? And they do that during the registration process, or maybe even when they come sign in that day at the event. Just let them know that this is something that could be happening, and then you can have a conversation with them if they are really uncomfortable with it. All right, number 2, maybe after you've kind of gotten number 1 figured out and you feel comfortable with it, let's now strive for informed consent, right? So again, if this is something where you're just now maybe mastering number 1, let's kind of take it one step further. And here are a couple ways that you can kind of get started to strive for informed consent. Number 1 is to walk through your consent form with your storyteller. So actually sitting down with them, talking them through the parts of your consent form, and answering any questions that they might have. Another great way to consider an informed consent process, again, kind of as a beginner, might be to provide alternative ways for people to understand consent language, because we all kind of learn in different ways, right? So especially if the language that your consent is in is not the storyteller's primary language, you want to make sure you do have it translated or have a translator that is able to help them understand that consent. Additionally, think about also offering it in video form or an audio form, because some people do actually just understand, they better learn in an audio way, right? So it's nice to have an alternative for people that just prefer to learn that way. All right, if we're thinking about our 3rd key to consent, let's remember that consent is not in perpetuity. So this is something that I learned last year during our first ethical storytelling report. This wasn't really something I had considered before, but it's a really great idea to actually check back in with your storytellers regularly. Especially if it's been over a year since you first shared their story, or 2 years, whatever makes sense for your organization. Please just go back and ask them, hey, is it still okay if I'm still sharing this story? You might find that they actually have an update for you, or they might find that they're no longer comfortable with it. And you will be very pleased that you made sure to ask. Another really interesting thing about consent is let's make sure we're providing an option for consent removal. So we actually just built into our MemoryFox, into the way MemoryFox works, an option where people can remove their consent as well. So even if they submitted a video or a photo to you last week, maybe today they kind of thought about it and they thought, you know what, I actually don't want that shared. They could go through the consent removal process, and then we'll help actually remove that story for them. Of course, there are considerations after a story has already been shared publicly on the internet. There are some barriers to actually fully removing a story, but of course, if you can remove it from your website, your social channels, especially from your story bank of future stories to share, that is always a great thing to have in your back pocket. And finally, let's just consider the risks that are associated with writing your consent forms and kind of the aspects of your consent form. So we actually work now pretty closely with our friend Allie Levine. She's a nonprofit attorney, and she kind of introduced me to this concept of consent sort of actually starts when you're thinking about the risks that are associated with it. So if you are able to identify, assess, manage, and monitor the actual risks of if a story that you said was going to be anonymous ends up not being anonymous, right? What would that look like? What kind of risks are out there? There's a lot of things that you can take into account, and that's kind of a conversation you would want to have internally to kind of go through to identify, assess, manage, and monitor. And then additionally, when it comes to risks, you want to really consult with your legal counsel about your consent form. Maybe you have somebody on your board, or maybe you could consider adding someone to your board that could look that language over for you. And especially, I want to point out that your state laws, they are different in every state. So there are actual things that may or may not need to be included based on where you live. So that is another consideration. All right, that was a lot about consent. So definitely get the report and check out that section because there's plenty more in there to learn. Okay, let's talk about our ethical storytelling case study. So if we're thinking about our friends at I Would Rather Be Reading, they are a nonprofit that's located in Kentucky. They were, when they first started, they were just doing after school programs. Now they do summer programs, and they've expanded to several different districts as well. But kind of the problem, or like what I want to talk about today in terms of their ethical storytelling, was that they were I'll start at the beginning. So their problem was that following the pandemic, probably like a lot of the nonprofits here, they were trying to find new funding sources. And the thing was, they had heard, in a bunch of webinars that storytelling would be a successful fundraising strategy for them, but they actually had never done it before. They had previously only done types of funding that didn't involve them having to share stories. However, what they found was, one component of their Educate and Elevate program, which is one of their flagship programs, is trauma-informed literacy support. So that means that they knew that the students that participated in this program, by nature, they had sensitive background stories. So this kind of shares maybe like a classic storytelling dilemma. And definitely give me a thumbs up or raise your hand in the chat if you feel like you have felt this dilemma before. But they were now stuck in this dilemma of, okay, but how do I share impactful stories without our families feeling shame or embarrassed? I see at least one thumbs up. Yeah, this is something that a lot of people are and then a hand up as well. So this is something that people, that's something that we're not trying to have our families feel shame or embarrassed, right? So what are we supposed to do? Well, I Would Rather Be Reading, they came up with a solution. They decided to make it an organization-wide policy just to focus their storytelling at their efforts on the progress their students have made, their learning experience, and their accolades. So what that meant was they were going to use storytelling prompts that would only use strength-based language and that would never ask the students about the needs that they had that were caused by their trauma. Okay, so that's a big commitment to make, right? We're only going to be talking about their learning experience and their accolades. Who even knew if this was going to work? But this was something that they felt very strongly about, and it was something they implemented right off the bat. So to give you some examples, I pulled these directly from their MemoryFox account. These are real prompts that they ask their students and their teachers and their staff. So examples of questions they ask their students. What is your favorite thing that we do in Educate and Elevate? Tell me one thing you love about yourself. What have you learned in Educate and Elevate? And also for their teachers and staff, they would ask them things like, what's a story that warms your heart from the times you've been tutoring? And when you pick up the kids, are they excited? What are some of the things they say? So they have an annual Hearts for Hope breakfast. They were going to show their first video at their fundraising event, the first video they've ever created. And what they did was they got 50 of these videos from the children where they recorded them answering these strength-based prompts. They put them all together to create one composite video. And I'm going to show you a minute of it here today. Just so you know, this is just a snippet of the video. It has been edited for length and clarity, just so you all can kind of feel like you understand the point of the whole video, but definitely go to YouTube and watch the full thing when you have a chance. But here's a snippet for you today.
79 of Kentucky's 120 counties are a child care desert. The average cost per month is $500 for after-school programs. This prevents 3 in 5 Kentucky families from participating. Childhood adversity does not have to determine a child's future. We asked our students, what is your favorite story that you've read at Educate and Elevate, and how did it help you?
I like this book because it teaches me how many different ways to be kind. I learned from the book these shoes that if you don't really need stuff, then you can probably give it to somebody that needs it.
I Would Rather Be Reading is committed to giving children purpose by encouraging them to become empowered young adults. We asked, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be a police officer. I got to know how to read. I want to be a nail artist when I grow up, and I have to focus and get perfect attendance. When I grow up, I want to be a soccer player and author. If I want to get there, I want to go to college and then graduate, and I can sign up for soccer, and then I can write about my career.
Lasting change requires us to work together. You can open the door to a world of opportunities for a child. We invite you today to join us on our journey to meet that goal.
All right, give me a thumbs up, give me a heart, whatever you're feeling after watching that video. Lots of little clips. Like I said, the big version of this has 50 different kids' videos talking about what they want to be when they grow up, what they learned from their books, all those questions that we talked about. So yeah, lots of hearts coming around. Love that. But did it work? Well, it did, because when they showed that video at their Hearts for Hope breakfast, they actually raised $32,000 right there in the room, right after they showed the video. And again, they weren't really sure what to expect because they've never done this before. So that actually ended up being 75% more than their original goal that they had for that event. So, they made a commitment to ethical storytelling, to strength-based messaging, to strength-based prompts, and they have really seen firsthand that does indeed still help them raise more funds. All right, as I am starting to wrap up all of the insights, I want to quickly talk about anonymous storytelling, because I bet some of you here are wondering, well, what do I do if the people I serve absolutely must remain anonymous? And I want to say that I do recognize that it's not always safe or comfortable for people to appear on camera, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't tell great stories. So here in the report, we have actually found 7 anonymous storytelling strategies. So I don't have time to go through each one of these today. So like I said, grab a screenshot or definitely download the report to learn about each one. But one that I want to touch on a little bit more specifically today is that last one, which is to tell the story of an object. So this is an option that you have, and I first heard about this strategy from our friend T. Clay Buck, and he said Agents for Good in Canada did this brilliantly when they told the story of people experiencing food insecurity through the point of view of the delivery truck. So what they did was they actually took their phone, they put it on the dashboard of the delivery truck, and they recorded the truck go throughout its day. And they talked about the stops the truck had to make to get gas and how that helps them, of course, go many, many more miles, about how they had to put air in the tire and that helped them reach several more families, and so on and so forth. They really talked about all the aspects that the truck had in actually performing their mission. Of course, Probably some of you don't work for food banks. Maybe that one doesn't particularly resonate with you, but maybe if you're an after-school program or a summer program, you could tell the story of a brown paper bag and how it holds nutrition that helps students learn how to read or learn teamwork or learn leadership skills. Whatever your program is really set up to do, we could talk about how a brown paper bag needs strength for something like that. Similarly, if you are a nonprofit that helps build homes or provides housing, maybe you could talk about the hammer and how much work that hammer had to put in order to help families start new lives or help families feel relief. These are just a few examples. If anybody has any other examples that relate to their mission, go ahead and let us know in the chat. We can do a little bit of idea sharing. I would love to hear your thoughts of what might work for your mission. All right, now wrapping up, it's really hard to try to get everything in an 81-page report down to just a few keys, but alas, I have done my best. We have 4 key takeaways of things that you can probably just go ahead and get started doing tomorrow to really jumpstart your ethical storytelling. So number 1 is to craft an ethical storytelling standards guide. So I talked about this towards the beginning. Really, my point is that having some sort of policy that everyone at your nonprofit, your board, your volunteers, everyone is at least at the baseline agreeing upon, that's going to start that culture of ethical storytelling and really going to make a huge difference. Our second key takeaway is to be upfront about all of your options. So let's talk about if you are going to offer anonymity, what does that look like? What can you tell your storyteller that might look like? In terms of platforms, where are all the platforms that a story could possibly be shared, or where will you be sharing their story? Or their timeline. How long do you think you'll share their story, or when will you check back in? Just being super upfront about these options with your storyteller, really laying it all out there about your intentions really makes you a trustworthy story steward. Number 3 is to always, always, always give the storyteller the final yes or the final no. So sometimes we get a little bit of pushback on this advice, and that is simply because people say, you know, I have a big deadline coming up. What if I don't hear back? What am I supposed to do? And I recognize that that puts you in a very challenging place, which is another good reason to collect stories all year long, right? And in real time. But let's say you are coming up on a deadline. I mean, I just want to say I really would like you to consider that there really is no deadline that's more important than being a good steward of sensitive stories. And finally, you probably could assume that this was going to be number 4 because I talked about it so much, but let's just start with collecting consent, right? Consent is so important. It's the number 1 way you can get started with your ethical storytelling journey. You know, start with that written or electronic checkbox. Begin implementing some informed consent practices. Really, my best advice is to try not to let all the nuances of consent overwhelm you to the point that you just don't collect stories. Instead, let's just find a great place to start. All right, so with all of that in mind, I want you to know that you at your nonprofit, no matter what your mission is, you do have great stories at your fingertips. In fact, I want you to think more broadly about the perspectives of stories that you can collect, and really just want to leave you with this final thought, which is, what are the great stories that you still have at your fingertips right now that you can collect? Here's a last little video from our friends at I Would Rather Be Reading, where they said, hey, who did it better, the kids or the grown-ups? And this is their disco version. I love ending on that one. I love the little Well, first of all, I always love when the girl surprises me that she's gonna go into a split because I forget that's gonna happen. And then the little disco at the end, so fun. All right, as I wrap up, I would love to answer any questions you have. Please go ahead, drop those in the chat. I haven't checked the Q&A yet, but maybe there's some great questions in there. Before I transition to that, I didn't really talk about MemoryFox today. Of course, that's not the point of today's webinar, but I do want to let you know, if you haven't already yet, we are doing a really fun giveaway in honor of the US Open Golf Tournament that's coming up next month. If you are not already a storyteller, or if you haven't, entered any of our other fun promotions this year, this is okay for you to enter. We are looking for 60 nonprofits to join us for this fun event. Basically, what we're looking for is you to book a time with us, and then one nonprofit, you're going to be matched with a golfer that's in the US tournament, and then whoever wins is going to win a free account. So it's really just a fun way to, watch golf, maybe a more fun way to watch golf. But it's really great because really everybody's a winner when you do something fun like this. All right, so I'm going to leave that up for a minute, and I'm going to check. Let's see here. Do I have any questions in the Q&A? Okay, no, I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Well, does anybody want to drop anything in the chat? Let me know maybe what's something that you learned today, maybe something new you learned, maybe something that you are looking forward to implementing. I'd love to hear what we're doing. Oh, good question. No, the giveaway would only be for new storytellers. So that's a great question, though. Our current MemoryFox storytellers not eligible for the US Open giveaway. Okay, I'm just gonna scroll up a little bit and see if I missed anything in the chat. Looks like Frank had some advice. He said, in terms of maybe the content warnings, I think that's what this is in relation to. We could add racial trauma to the list. I think that's an important one to add. Love that. What else do we have here? Looks like maybe we just have, the missions again that are here in the chat. Love to see that. Well, great. I am hoping everybody learned something today. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Let me know if you enjoyed the content today. I'm definitely open to feedback if you want to email me later about other things that you would like me to cover in the future. Of course, we are definitely going to be doing a 2025 ethical storytelling report. I'd love you all to be a part of the survey, be an ethical storytelling case study, be a contributor. This report really only works because we have so many people contributing to it, and we have so many people that are willing to give their insights and really share their personal experiences with ethical storytelling. So whatever you feel like you could contribute, or if you want to be a part of it, more than I would actually truly enjoy that. It would be very exciting for me. Looks like I got some more thumbs up coming in. So thank you so much, everybody. And if there's no other questions, then I guess I will go ahead and wrap this up a little early. You can have a few minutes back of your time today, maybe a few minutes to start writing that ethical storytelling standards guide, or maybe start working on your consent form. But thank you all so much for joining. Like I said, you will be getting the recording shortly after this. And I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your spring and a wonderful rest of your year. And we'll see you at the next event, hopefully.